everyone. I'm Ken Lawson with the Uptown Chamber of Commerce that covers Temple Terrace and the Uptown Tampa region. It's our pleasure to have you join us today for a conversation with Joe York, President of AT&T Florida and the Caribbean. Joe, thanks a lot for joining us today. How are you two? You doing all right today?
I'm doing great, Ken. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you too. And Joe, we really appreciate you joining the chamber, and we're recording this conversation for our members to learn more about AT&T, your vision, the telecommunications industry, and what's going on in the economy. And I'd like to briefly introduce you and say what a great guy you are. I've known you for over a decade. You're a leader of AT&T and also the Auburn grad, a war eagle like Jerry Parrish. And you've been a true servant to the state of Florida, serving on the board of directors of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. The governor's appointed you to the Jacksonville Port Authority, and you've been the chairman of the board of the Port Authority, I believe. But more importantly, you've provided services to our citizens. And again, love to hear more about what you're doing. So today, I get to play Barbara Walters. Right. I'll ask you some questions. So I'll pitch and you'll catch and you'll throw back.
Okay.
So first off, please tell us, can you share your journey with AT&T? Give us more about your background, who you are, and where you came from.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. First off, everybody, it's great to be with you today. I know Zoom can be a little bit awkward versus face-to-face, and certainly we all love face-to-face. But one thing that this does allow, I'm in Jacksonville, all of you are in Tampa. It does allow us to share with people who might not be directly in our area. So it's great to have venues like Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or others that allow us to do this. So I appreciate it. It's not quite the same as being with you, but it's good to be with you. And I'll just start by saying this. I don't know, 7-8 years ago, I was asked to speak at an event Governor Scott was having at the governor's mansion. And I had to follow Ken Lawson. Well, let me just tell you, you do not want to follow Ken Lawson in a speech. He is a tremendous speaker. He has that booming Marine voice, and just really appreciate the friendship we've had, Ken, working with you. But it's certainly better to have a back and forth today as opposed to me trying to follow you. You do such a fantastic job. My journey with AT&T. So 20 years. I've been with the company a little bit more than 20 years. That happened this summer. So 2002, I started with the company, and I've done a variety of jobs. I started in Orlando, loved Orlando, met my wife in Orlando. And the first job I had at AT&T was kind of doing an external affairs lead executive for Central Florida. And essentially what that means is I was the face of the company for the market in Central Florida. I got to learn a lot about all the various and different businesses. I did sales support, high-end client support, but also got to learn, how to problem solve, because when there's a problem that hits somebody externally, i.e. a customer, a key stakeholder, et cetera, they would come to me to help solve that problem. And then I had to navigate AT&T to figure out how to solve that problem. So that was a great, really first job for me, working for AT&T. But if you back up a little bit, before that, I had a consulting firm, and AT&T was one of my clients, and I represented them for 3 years, and really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. And I think that helped prepare me for when I came into the company. And the company's moved me around a little bit. I always said I wanted to see what I could do within AT&T without ever leaving the state of Florida. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, I've done a lot in Florida. I give a lot of my time to the state. I love it. So a little background on me is I grew up in a military family. My dad was a career Army. He worked his way up as an enlisted man. He was Special Forces in the Green Beret. Ultimately became a helicopter pilot, and then flew for the Special Forces at some point in his career toward the end of it. So I grew up on Army bases all over the world, and I really have an affinity for the military, and it certainly taught me a lot about life and kind of prepared me for my professional career, even though I didn't serve myself in the military. And so Uh, the time with AT&T has allowed me to move up, but stay in Florida. When you're in the military, you're moving every 2 or 3 years. So at some point you pick where you're from as a kid. And my grandparents had a place in Jacksonville Beach. So I was from Florida, and I love Florida. I care about the state. I want to see the state do well. And even in my role today, I compete with other executives within AT&T for capital for the state of Florida. So I'm competing against Georgia, Texas, California, and New York. Quite honestly, Florida's making it pretty easy for me to sell the point that we need more investment in Florida because the state is just truly on fire economically. And so I moved on from Orlando, did a stint in Tallahassee as I was head of the government affairs and regulatory team in Tallahassee. And as you know from AT&T being such a part of the community for so long, at one point in time, for those of you who've been around, we were a highly regulated company, and we were a monopoly. So the regulatory, the compliance aspects were significant. That allowed me to learn another aspect of the business. The government affairs has been a part of my career even prior to AT&T. So I was certainly prepared for that aspect, but learning the regulatory compliance side of it was certainly a benefit, and it served me well since I've been in this role as state president, which I think I've been in it going on, I think it'll be 9 years at the end of December in this current role.
Well, congratulations for your service for the last 9 years. And I wanted to say thank you for your father for his service to the country. And your journey is fascinating, and just how you've grown in AT&T and understanding how it serves our state. But we'd love for our folks to learn more about your business model at AT&T. What is the structure? What's the focus? Where are you going right now with the company?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the economy, and we may come back to that at some point in time. And a lot of change within AT&T, but familiar change, if you'll allow me. You think about AT&T a few years ago, we went through this period where vertical integration and growing as a company. We acquired DirecTV. Some of y'all recall that a little more than 10 years ago. 2 or 3 years later, we acquired Warner Brothers, which we renamed Warner Media. And that includes HBO, the movie studios, CNN, etc. And really the idea was that you're going to have this vertically integrated company that provides you the technology, the connection, but also provides you the content. And an idea and concept, it seemed like a good idea, but the reality was that you had these two companies that were very different. If you think about AT&T, as you all know AT&T, the communications broadband provider versus the media company, they both utilize a lot of capital investments. And so when we're building 5G or expanding fiber, that costs a substantial amount of money, and we invest a lot of money. I think we invest more capital than any company in America, still to this day. And so, but then you have the media side of it, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to have these blockbuster events. They pay high wages for the talent, the Hollywood talent. And so you had these two different companies that were battling for capital. And so it was best to separate them off. We sold DirecTV almost 2 years ago. And we sold Warner Media back in the spring. So Warner Media combined with Discovery Networks. And I think they're going to do really well. I think this HBO Max product is going to continue to grow. But the reason we did that was so that AT&T could get focused on being America's best broadband provider. So if you think about fiber, you think about 5G, that is our focus. And so I think that's been a positive for us. And we're spending a lot of time, a lot of capital, expanding, whether it's our 5G network or our fiber network. And I'm happy to get into a little bit more conversation about that.
Well, it's interesting. It's exciting. Again, it sounds like you really focus on your value proposition as a business. And I remember I was at an AT&T store and I was getting phone service, and people were fantastic. I was getting the HBO bundle too. I think I texted you and see how great the store was and the workers. And Understanding that you're focused on your value proposition, how many locations across Florida do you service? How many stores do you have?
Yeah, so we have just under 1,000 stores across Florida, and
Yeah.
our employee base in Florida is a little bit more than 11,000 employees that are
Wow.
based across the state. Our investment, I talked about AT&T's investment across the country. We've
Sure.
consistently been over $1 billion in capital investment across the state
Oh,
for
wow.
the last several years, and I don't see that changing in the short term.
Understand. That's a real investment, especially here in the Tampa region. That means a lot in terms of jobs and economic development.
Yeah.
What are some of the key services in Florida? I know you touched on it, but maybe drill down more granular.
Yeah, so if you think about being America's best broadband provider, I would say that includes two things. It includes wireless and it includes wired. And when you think about wired, you think about fiber. And fiber optics, without question, is the best broadband. It's the best product that you can get from a perspective of broadband, the capabilities, the capacity, the speed, the latency. And we're building a lot more of it. We're already America's largest fiber provider in America. And I think if these numbers are still accurate, we average 350 new living units that we connect per hour across the country on average. Yeah.
Wow.
So our goal is to reach 30 million living units across the country by the end of 2025. And you think about what happened with COVID and the fact that we're on this Zoom. Nobody knew what Zoom was 3-4 years ago, but COVID happened and we all quickly understood the value and the benefit of Zoom. And all these employees that were working for companies. I'm in my office today, but I work from home quite a bit, like a lot of y'all did as well. And some still are working from home and probably will work from home permanently, or at least in some hybrid mode as our world changes. And I think we'll continue to flush that out companies will over the course of the next several years. So all this capacity during the day went from the enterprise side of the business where companies were utilizing this capacity, and it had to shift to the consumer base, meaning at your home. And people were, for the first time, I think, really demanding better broadband. And certainly in a lot of places, we have a really good story to tell, but there's still a lot of gaps in broadband. And I'm talking about real broadband where you have the ability to have north of 100 megabytes. I talk about fiber because fiber is future-proof. Fiber is going to continue. We just upgraded our fiber to where our customers can get 2 to 5 gigabits symmetrical. So upload, download, you're getting the same speeds. You don't get that with some of the other competing products out there. And eventually, the capacity on fiber will be able to go up to 10 gigabits in the future. So I don't know if we needed that much a few years ago. But with COVID, everybody working from home, the demand started to stack. And a lot of people started buying products like a Peloton bike. I have a Peloton bike. It's connected. This thing's connected. And you don't even realize how many devices you probably have connected on your Wi-Fi network at home. So fiber certainly gives us an advantage there. And we're going to build a lot of it, but it's not easy to build, as you can imagine, because we're literally building a new network. So we've got 16 plus million living units across the country. And you think about 2.45 people per living unit. So it's a lot of people that we're covering, and we're going to go to 30 million by 2025. The reason for that is you had the spike in demand for COVID, but the spike has continued. So between 2021 and 2025, demand on broadband networks is going to increase. People are going to use 5 times as much data than they did 2 years ago.
Amazing.
So it's continuing to escalate.
Wow. Hey, Joe, you said a lot right there. I think you kind of incorporate changes in the industry, especially since COVID. Products you're looking at, and perhaps your fiber optics rollout strategy kind of touched on that. But I love Star Trek, the original one. And the doctor would say this a lot to Jim. Say, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a scientist. So for some of our members who might understand broadband, fiber optics, 5G, and wireless, pull you back because it's exciting, but
Yeah.
explain a little bit the differences and how that fits into your strategy you just shared with us.
Sure. So for our company, it's two things. There's wireless, which today is 5G, and 5G just stands for the fifth generation. So we went through, some of you who are old enough to remember the old StarTech flip phone, which was a very good phone.
I love that phone.
Yeah, I love that phone too. But all you did on that phone was talk. You didn't do anything else on that phone. And then we moved to Blackberries. And then the iPhone came. And the iPhone came in the 3G age. And what happened with the iPhone was it changed the game. It forced the wireless providers to realize that we didn't have the capacity for all the things, for the first time, for all the things that the iPhone could do. And we're not talking about just making voice calls. We're talking about everything else that came with that. And most of that came really with the 4G. When we evolved into 4G and LTE, that's when you started having companies like Airbnb, Venmo, Uber, etc. All this ecosystem does not exist without the wireless companies going from 3G to 4G. Well, now we're going from LTE and 4G to 5G, and there will be an evolution, and we can get into a little bit more depth there, but to kind of cover the basics. So that's the wireless side. And even on wireless, you've got to have fiber to the tower, because what you want to do is, even though 5G is going to be incredibly fast, the capacity is going to be amazing, latency, and I can get into that in a little bit as well, is going to be so much better. You want to get that data onto a fiber optic network immediately. So we're spending money and have all of our wireless towers have fiber backhaul. So now I go to the wired side. Fiber is what you will want in your house if you don't have it. Today, you have choices between fiber, which is what we're providing, and cable has coaxial cable. It's a pretty good product as well. I don't think it does as much as fiber. I think that's the reason why the cable industry is starting in their new build to build fiber as opposed to the old coaxial cable. And then you go back to us, and we still have some DSL customers that exist across the state and across the country. And DSL is just very limited. You think about the old copper wire network. That's the old landline that everybody had a phone in their house, and 20 plus years ago, that was the predominant way that people communicated. Today, most people don't have a landline in their house. It's very unusual when someone does. And if they do, it's probably not on the copper network. We do still have a few copper network users across the state, but it's pretty limited based on our population. So when you think about broadband, there's two ways to think about it. There's the fixed wire that's into your house, and then there's the wireless, and they both do incredible things. What you're going to see with 5G is this really a ramping up. So anytime we bring on a new technology, it always, in my opinion, kind of under delivers in the short on the front end, and then on the back end, it probably over delivers. And I think if you look at the internet, it was like that. There was all this hype for the internet. And then it kind of just, it's like, oh, is this all there is to it? Now we see really what's happening as we enter this digital world. The internet is certainly over delivering on the capabilities and how it's changing every aspect of our life. 5G is going to be a lot like that as well. So right now you see 5G, depending on where you are, you might notice some upgraded speeds, but there's a kind of an ecosystem within 5G. So there's the broad base. We've got 5G across 97% of America. Now we're adding on top of that what we call the C-band spectrum of 5G, which when you start getting that, and most people will have that by the end of this year, if they don't already have it, you're going to start seeing speeds of 200 to 400 megabytes per second on your phone download. Now, upload speeds via wireless are never going to be as good. And you may ask, what's the difference between download and upload? So right now, what I'm doing, talking to all of you, is I'm uploading. So my network is uploading, or if I put a video out, I'm uploading. If I download something, well, you get it. It's a download. If you're gaming like my 13-year-old son likes to do, and he's doing it online, he's doing both. There's upload and download. And we've really cared about the download speeds forever, but really the upload speed's important too. So 5G is going to be a game changer. It's going to be a game changer for artificial reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. And imagine if I could just simplify it, mixed reality would be you have some form of goggles. You've all seen them. Probably everybody that's listening has tested those at some point in time. Mixed reality is where you can see the artificial or the virtual reality, but you're also aware of the space around you. So at some point, instead of a computer screen, you may just put on glasses and have a computer screen here, a computer screen here, but the ability to see your wall or your desk or whatever. And the computer screen travels with you as long as you're connected from a mixed reality. Virtual reality is headsets on and you're in this different world, right? And so all of those require, if you've ever done it and you felt like a little off, or some people get a little dizzy, the reason that happens is the latency, the speed of which the system is operating is not as quick as your eye. The human eye, the latency, we see things in about 5 to 13 milliseconds, and most latencies historically have been much slower than that. What 5G has the promise of doing is getting latency below 20 milliseconds, getting it to 15 milliseconds. And as it evolves, eventually it'll be instantaneously. It'll happen as soon as your eye sees it. So think about 5G and all of mankind's knowledge and taking edge computing and having all of mankind's knowledge within a finger snap of you, because 5G brings the cloud closer to you. So you have access to so many different things at a faster speed. That's where we're going to see it evolve. It's going to take a few years. I mean, 5G will be an evolution that will last. I have a lot of people ask me, when is 6G going to happen?
Exactly.
We're going to go through this evolution in 5G for quite a while, because then there's what we call millimeter wave 5G, which has a very short radius from these, like what we call small cells that are like, they look like light poles. And the signal is only good for about 15 to 2,000 yards, but those speeds are gigabit speeds with, you know, latency below 10 milliseconds. So faster than your eyeball will recognize something is how fast that latency is going to be. The other thing that's interesting about 5G is in a 4G world, in a square mile, we may have the ability to connect a few thousand devices. In a 5G world, we're going to be able to connect 10x that. So the capacity for that one tower becomes a lot more, and everything's connected. So I just redid my kitchen at my house while we were going through COVID. And the reason why my refrigerator and my oven took so long to deliver is because of the chips and the delay in chips and the shortage that we have in chips because of supply chain, because all those things are now connected. They're all connected to a Wi-Fi system, which goes back to my earlier point about how many connections we have.
Wow.
I hope I answered your question. I covered a lot, took a little bit of a wormhole on 5G, but I think it's important, and certainly I think that's going to be where the future is fiber and 5G, and we can't build enough of it quick enough.
Understand. You more than answered the question. You kind of reset the stage. And also, I didn't say this in the beginning, at the end of perhaps me playing Barbara Walters, love for folks to ask you some questions to follow up on this, because this is exciting information about where you're going with your company. And I can see why you focus on your value proposition and really drilling down to really what matters towards the future. And you kind of implied this. I mean, where are you with the time frame with this vision, nationally and also in the state of Florida? I know you're at the beginning, but what steps have you taken? Where you feel like you're at right now?
Yeah, I think we're in the early stages of it. I think there's just going to be this evolution that will probably in some regards be similar to the 4G evolution and the iPhone and the smartphone being a necessity as we went from flip phones to Blackberries to really computers, right? And expensive computers at that, if you've bought a new iPhone recently. But I think the evolution is going to continue, and it's going to impact things that you probably wouldn't think about from a wireless perspective. It's going to impact, it already is, manufacturing, care, education, public safety. So one of the aspects of our company is that we are the FirstNet provider, and FirstNet is the public safety purpose-built broadband network for first responders.
Oh, wow.
And that was the last recommendation of the 9/11 Commission to actually get inputted. We competed for that contract, and we're now substantial market share in the public safety sector. So they're going to benefit from technology that historically hasn't been in the public safety arena because there was too much risk with new technology, but that is shifting rapidly. So back to your question about where we are in this cycle, we're still very early on, and what you're going to find is whether it's the virtual reality, augmented reality game. There's a company in South Florida. It's a really interesting company. I hope that they're successful, but it's called Magic Leap. And Magic Leap is in that they have some of the most incredible goggles out there. And again, that world is just starting to appear. Facebook is talking about their metaverse, and you're starting to see a lot of ads for it. But I think it's really going to become something in 2 to 3 years, which will be the norm, that you'll have a lot of people that will game and do other things with goggles, artificial, virtual, or mixed use reality. You might have somebody that's an elevator repairman. Yeah. And they come in, they put their goggles on, and they know which elevator, and then it just shows them exactly what to do. Well, that'll happen in a lot of different ways. Think about education. So you may be an art student at a university who can't afford to go to Florence. I just happen to have, my wife and I went to Florence a few months ago. But imagine if you were able to put on virtual reality headset and be in one of the great museums with the curator of the museum, and it's in high fidelity. It's as if you were there. And you got to experience as an art student that ability to be at the Louvre or wherever it may be, the Uffizi, whatever the museum might be, but you're getting to experience in such a rich way that maybe you couldn't experience it in before. I think that's part of the future. I think healthcare, I think how we do home healthcare, a lot of that telemedicine, we're just at the beginning stages of what can be done there. But some of you probably have apps on your watch or on your phone. I track my sleep, my heart rate, the various things that, you can even do an EKG on your iPhone today. And those things, we're just at the early stages of that, but they require a broadband ecosystem that will work for those devices and for those startups that are building this new technology. That's going to all be built around a 5G ecosystem. Then you've got driverless cars. That can't happen until you really have ubiquitous 5G, because right now you have a driverless car and they have this massive hardware in the car that requires a lot of battery capacity. And those hopefully will get smaller, and pulling the signal from a small cell tower will provide them everything that they need in real time with low latency and speeds and capacity to do so. That's when you're really going to see the driverless car revolution happen. And so there's a lot of interesting things that are going to happen in that world. And that can't happen without both 5G and fiber. That's why we're building so much of it. Our challenges are always, how fast can we get the capital that we're investing to actually impact the customer who might consider buying our product? Meaning, how fast are governments providing permits and turning that around? You got a state like Florida, that can be a challenge because we're growing so much. And so there's so much demands on the system, and they treat the permitting center like a cost center. And as opposed to really thinking about it as an economic development engine that helps developers, helps broadband providers, et cetera, build this network out. Because the quicker you get it built, the better and more strategic advantage you have as a city, a community, a business, whatever it may be, if you have the good technology.
Well, Joe, you just touched on a lot of things that really look at changing our country, our state, and society. And and also you touched on say partnership between say AT&T with government. And
Mhm.
in fact, we have a city council member and a head of the Temple Terrace Business um, Manager's Office on the call, and that's important. So we can hear your voice, and needs. From your experience working with, say, state government and local officials, you touched on it. How is it working out for you? Are you finding roadblocks? Is there cooperation, or is it a mutual growth of understanding? Kind of building on what you just touched on.
Yeah, I think big picture is generally really positive. I think our
Yeah.
state has really embraced and understands the value of technology. Also, you think about because we are a hurricane state,
Yes.
the redundancies that's required. So every time we're building a small cell or a macro tower or putting fiber in, the other thing we're doing is we're adding redundancy to our network. So the more touch points you have, if power impacts or substantial winds impact a particular distribution point, a tower, a signal, etc., we have the ability through a virtualized network to reroute that if we have enough distribution points available to reroute that network. So it provides a lot of redundancies. The government, I mean, yeah, there's some places that the city level or county level where we've had some issues with permits that'll will sit for 6 months to a year.
Hmm. Hmm.
And quite honestly, my team works really hard to try to partner with local governments. I have an external affairs team. So I talked about my history. So part of what our external affairs team do across the state is they become the face for this company. We localize AT&T. Again, we have over 11,000 employees in the state. So we are a local company, but we're a big company. And
Yes.
so our external affairs team gives us the ability to work with, whether it's at the state level, and the state has been unbelievable for the last 10 years. I think they've really understood and passed legislation that generally is trying to get us to a place that from a technology perspective, we're as good as it gets when you're competing with the other states. And at the local level, I would say most cities have done a fantastic job. And typically when we see problems, it's not a policy priority problem. It typically is a manpower problem or a
Sure.
bandwidth problem, just because that's one of the challenges with growth. We have a lot of challenges with growth, but you would rather have those challenges than the challenges that some other states have, which is contraction. That's a recipe for failure long term. So I think generally it's been really good. We work really hard to try to make it a partnership because we believe it is in that way. We believe that the world has changed. So Hurricane Michael hit the Panhandle just a few years ago. And it used to be, if you went back when I started my career in Orlando, and I thought when I went to Orlando, I wasn't gonna have to worry about hurricanes. And 2 years later, we had two that came right through Orlando and did a fair amount of damage. What people wanted first was always power.
Sure.
Then it might be cable, maybe it's your phone, but it was always power. Now that we have these, everybody wants that iPhone or Android phone working ASAP. They expect, well, maybe my power is going to be out for a day or two, but they want that phone working right away. And so we have quite a fleet of deployables that we bring in. An example, using the Hurricane Michael example, because of FirstNet 2, and we'll come back to FirstNet at some point, our network was actually, after 2 or 3 days, was performing above 100% of what our network does, because we brought in overwhelming force to help all those local governments, sheriffs, etc., with cows. We have wireless blimps, wireless drones. Some of that got a lot of attention, but those can be strategic in really hard hit areas where something like Hurricane Michael, it allows us to do certain things like that. So our partnership, whether it's at the state level with the legislature, the executive branch, the emergency operations crew, this time of year, I almost always have the Weather Channel in the background on my TV here. Thank God, August has probably been the most quiet, and I'm knocking on wood. I don't want to jinx myself or busy September or October, but so far it's been pretty good. But we work a lot with the Emergency Operations Center at the state level and at the local level.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, I mean, what you do, across the state, in Tallahassee, and each region, and in fact, here in Tampa, a shout out to Ed Moraine for his leadership working with you. You've been great partners. And, and with public safety, what you described is so important. Sure, there's clear communication during times of crises and ensuring that we have coverage throughout the state, whether you're in a metropolitan area or maybe rural areas is key. And I know for the last several years, ensuring broadband in rural areas has been an important issue across the nation and the state of Florida. Where are you in terms of ensuring growth in rural areas for broadband?
Yeah, so we're continuing a strong commitment to invest in underserved and unserved areas. Yeah. The federal government has also pushed a lot of money. There's a little bit of a lag time on it, but I think you're going to start seeing a state grant and maybe a local grant program where we're resolving some of the coverage issues in rural. So I talked about fiber and getting fiber to as many people as possible. And the cost of fiber when you move to rural areas can go from 3 to 7 times the amount it costs us in suburban or metropolitan areas. So it can get very expensive. And then when you go really rural, fiber may not even be a solution. And I don't know that there are probably a couple of pockets in Florida where that's the case, but if you go to Wyoming, where if anybody's ever been to Wyoming, you can drive for miles without seeing a house or anybody, right? Those places where they have that house, they're not getting fiber. Quite honestly, the people that live there probably don't want it anyway.
Off the grid.
Yeah, they want to be off the grid. That's why they're there. Yeah. So we are spending a lot of time and focus on building that out. The state is going through the process with the rural broadband grant that's coming from DEO, which you know very well. And we plan to participate, and I hope that other companies will as well. What fiber does, what broadband service, because there's going to be multiple ways we solve this problem. And in Florida, it's not like there's 2 spots with all these people. It's 1,000 little problems. I live in St. Johns County, and in southern St. Johns County during COVID, I got this call about this community that, their kids weren't able to really get good online coverage. And we knew that from a fiber perspective that they didn't have coverage, but our map from a wireless perspective showed that they had pretty good wireless coverage down there. So I went down there. Well, this little community of about 20 homes is in a heavily dense pine tree forest. And so wireless can't always penetrate when there's literally hundreds of trees surrounding your house. And you build a house that just happened to be a spot where maybe you cleared a couple of trees, but there's a lot of trees. And we got to figure out how to solve those problems. But again, it's not like there's 2 or 3 of them. It's 1,000 little problems here and there. There's still a couple places within cities, not many, but small places, neighborhoods that need an upgrade, whether it's getting fiber or cables, upgraded product as well. And I think we're going to solve that problem. I think we're going to solve that problem for most people. The people that live out by themselves, there's not anybody within miles, may not want that problem solved, but they're going to get it from a wireless perspective too, because our FirstNet obligation requires that we cover pretty much everything. We even have to provide coverage into the ocean for a few miles in particular places because of FirstNet. Because you think about where first responders go, they need to be able to have that signal. So we're probably the only wireless company that's still building macro towers in rural parts of the state. And with 5G and the speeds there, I think that's going to help. When small towns have good broadband, that's economic development. And you think about the world, and I talked about this at the very beginning, it used to be that you lived where you worked. Right. Now, for a lot of people, they have the choice to take their work where they want to live. That's why you're seeing high quality of living places just flourish, whether it's a multitude of them in Florida. Any ski town across the country has blown up. All these high quality of living places are seeing an influx of people. The other thing that we're starting to see is that an influx of people that want to live in more rural communities, but they want their connection. That's the piece. The people that want that lifestyle, they still want to be connected. And so when those cities do get that connection, it's going to give them an economic development advantage that you're not going to get in any other way. And it's going to help their schools. It's going to help their kids, solving the issue of the homework gap, right? Where so much of your homework's done online, and there's so many kids that still, whether it's through having connectivity or not having the devices and adopting and utilizing the internet, that fall behind because of the homework gap. And I think there's a lot of good things happening to solve that. We're certainly working on that as well.
I appreciate that, Joe, because you touched on my next question. It's I know you're busy. We're going to wrap up at 1. I'm going to ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
And open it up for the audience to ask questions, but kind of building on the digital divide gap, just building on what you just said about the homework gap. Are there any initiatives tailored towards small and medium businesses in this arena?
Yeah, so on the digital divide, I will tell you that we have a $2 billion effort. That's in addition to our capital spend that's going to underserved and unserved parts of the country.
Yeah,
we're going to spend $2 billion on the digital divide. And so how we're doing that, there's a couple of different ways. First off, we have a program called AT&T Access. One of the things that we changed in AT&T Access was that we made it for $30. You can get 100 meg upload and download in your home for $30, which is an incredible price point if you qualify via the eligibility standards. You pair that with the new program that the federal government passed a couple of years ago, the Affordable Connectivity Program. And essentially, there are a certain group of folks that will benefit from free broadband service. So that was one of the steps we've taken. $2 billion that we've committed, started last year. The other thing we're doing is we're building out connected learning centers. And think about these as they're typically going to be in underserved or unserved areas. And they might be a boys and girls club or some after school type of program. The first thing we're going to do is provide fiber and Wi-Fi to that facility, that not-for-profit. The next thing we're going to do is provide them with the tools, i.e. iPads, laptops, etc. And then the final piece that we've worked on, and we've partnered with many great content providers on this, is we've created a kind of an HBO Max for digital education and literacy, meaning you're going to have all these different platforms, many of which our children are already familiar with and integrated with, that'll allow them to learn, but in a very easy way to operate, and a lot of choices there. So we're bringing all those programs together. I think we're close to having our 20th center announced across the country, and we're going to continue to build that out. It used to be that our foundation would spend 50 or 60% on education, 25% on this, 25% on something else. Now we're pretty much putting about 75%, 80% of our foundation dollars toward groups that are supporting the digital divide. So a lot of our partners in Florida that we've given to over the years, we've now asked them to tweak it a little bit or come up with new programs that will help us with innovative ideas to solve that problem. I think you also mentioned small businesses as well.
I did.
Yeah, and so when I talk about the connections that we're doing in the living units, I'm including small business. We actually think that's going to be a major growth because there's a propensity to buy. 3 or 4 years ago with fiber, the propensity to buy was a lot less. So the economics have gotten better. People recognize the value. So when we build it, people are likely to purchase it. So we're going to build more and more of it. We're connecting a ton of small to medium-sized businesses with fiber, some of which we're providing just a wireless solution if that's what they need. But certainly we think fiber is one of the best solutions you can possibly have if you have a business.
That's great, Joe. Thank you for what you're doing to help, fill the divide and narrow the gap.
Yeah.
One last question for me. I'm going to put some bullets in it and maybe wrap up a short answer, and then we'll open up for everyone else last 10 minutes. But generally, what are your thoughts on the economy involving workforce and also key economic impacts on AT&T and the Tampa region itself, since we're talking about Tampa, although
Yeah.
you're in Jacksonville?
Yeah. So, well, I don't know that my news is positive on the economy. I mean, I just think we're entering in, and I kind of think about things as seasons of life, and I think we're about to enter into a winter season. I don't know. I like to study the economy. I was a business major with my first degree, and I've been fascinated by the history of our economy. And it's, for everybody on here, just about only maybe a couple of people have ever dealt with serious inflation. Like I haven't in my professional career dealt with any real inflation. So you have to go back to look at like the 1965 to maybe it's more the late 60s to 1982, where we had long-term inflation. And you watch the Fed in the 70s that tried to thread the needle of, not doing too much interest rates because they didn't want to hurt the economy. I think the Fed chairman today is, and he made some comments this week, we fully expect that interest rates will continue to rise over the course of the rest of this year. And we expect that inflation is going to stay high for a period of time, and that's going to have really big impacts. So how do you fix that? Well, in the early 80s, Paul Volcker fixed it by allowing interest rates to rise. And it kind of took the economy, or hurt the economy, but it allowed it to come back quicker. And I think that we're probably going to see something similar. The differences are our market is very competitive. So it's really a good time on the labor side of it. There are a lot of options for employees that haven't existed. There's a lot more jobs than there are people looking for jobs. I think that's going to change. I think if you pay attention to Fortune 500 companies that have made announcements, there's been a lot of job freezes, and we're starting to see layoffs be announced as well. And so there's a lag time. There's a lag time for when the economy is in a recession and you feel it in a recession. And I think we're kind of in that lag. So I really think we're going to see it, in a few months. I think Florida. Florida in the past is really been one of the first ones off the deep end. But I think our economy really, Governor Scott focused on this, and I think Governor Sanders has continued to focus on it, has really diversified quite a bit since the last time we went through this. So I think Florida may be in a little bit better situation. But when you have almost 1,000 people moving in a day, it certainly does make certain things from an economic perspective positive. When the economy, that lag time is up and people start feeling it, less people are going to move, unfortunately. Right. And so we will feel it. I think home builders are starting to, the whole model of home building changed, right? It used to be if you wanted to go into a new neighborhood, you went to a model home and you picked out and designed it. Now, and you bought it. And so as it took 9 months to build, if it went up in value, the buyer got that benefit. Was the market was just going crazy, home builders changed that, model. And they're like, no, we're going to build, a lot of homes, and we'll sell them when they're ready to be sold, because we want to keep that value and benefit from that. Well, the challenge with that is if interest rates go up a certain amount, all of a sudden you're holding inventory for a lot longer, and they can impact your bottom line. So we're going to see the impacts in Florida. I think we're better positioned than a lot of states to deal with it. And I do think that it's very clear today. It used to be that the economy hit all 50 states, to one degree or less, close to the same. I don't think that's true anymore. And I think that there are winner and loser states right now from an economic policy perspective. And I think some of those states might be better suited to manage through this. You still have a pension issue, municipal pensions, that could be an issue for some cities across the country, and even some states that might have some vulnerabilities there. To AT&T, how we're seeing it, the cost of building this fiber and this 5G and expanding our network has increased substantially over the course of the last 14 months. We had baked in some inflation and we saw it coming, but we certainly probably weren't prepared for how expensive it got. We also weren't prepared for how challenging the labor market got, like almost instantaneously. And we're trying to do some things about that. One of the things we just announced, literally, I think we might have announced it today, is we've made a partnership with Corning. Corning manufactures fiber. We buy and have had a long partnership with Corning for a very long time. We're building, or Corning is building, and we are supporting them on this build. They're building 2 new manufacturing plants in America. I think one's going to be in North Carolina and one's going to be out west. And we're partnering and committing to hire a certain amount of people and also buy a certain amount of their fiber. But that's kind of one of the ways we're trying to navigate. That's something that I don't know that would have happened 10 or 15 years ago, but companies have to be thinking in those terms to make sure that we mitigate, we put ourselves in a competitive advantage so that we have the ability to continue to build out these services that are going to provide good benefit to our customers and a good return on value to our shareholders.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Joe, this has been comprehensive, very dynamic and informative for my members. For the last few minutes, I'd love for folks to ask you some questions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, good. Sherry Donahue had asked earlier if she can ask. I told her to wait to the end. Sherry, why don't you come off mute and share your question with the group?
Hi, Sherry.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
Nice to have you here. You touched on education quite often. So my question would be, are you doing anything in the actual K-12 environment or in our technical schools to help you not only, get the message out, but to grow this workforce that you're going to need? And, so I guess that's one question. I have a second one, but can we get, I think
I'll come back to you on the second one.
What you've said.
Let me take the first one first. So we do a lot in the K-12 education world. Actually, that's probably where most of our dollars go. And it's, over the course of the last several years, it's millions and millions of dollars. But I'll give you a couple of examples. We've had a partnership with and I'll tell you why we can't go directly to the schools, because the schools participate in E-rate. So they get money from the federal government. They put out bids for communication services like internet, and we and other companies compete. So once we compete, if we win that, there's certain things we can't do that might look like we're trying to influence that bid, right? So the way we've kind of dealt with that is instead of, we can't go and sponsor a school or do something like that. What we do is we work with the Florida Education Foundation Consortium. And we've had STEM-based programs all across the state. Now, they're all different, but we've been a part of that group and been committing at a pretty high level. I think we're well over $1 million to them over the course of the last several years. And we've had groups in Sarasota County that create like a NASCAR or an IndyCar type technology. And we have others that worked on modernizing a logistics hub in the central part of the state. So all these different education foundations come up with their programs, and then we give a large amount to the consortium that then gives it to those programs. We also do some things at the local level as well. Education is critical. We've got to figure out more ways to make sure that students have the ability to learn via a device. So there's a connectivity issue, and then there's the adoption issue. And the adoption is making sure that they have devices or a place that they can go with a device and be connected.
Right. Thank you so much. STEM is the magic word.
Yeah. Right
there. And like you say, going through the education foundations is probably the smartest way for you to be able to affect that change. On the local level, you said that you have, you just, by the way, you just kept feeding into my questions. I was like, this guy's great. He's reading my mind. On the local level, you mentioned how many employees you have and how many stores you have. So in order for your company to be involved in communities and to, make that community partnership, what is the best method for the communities to connect to you? Directly to the store in their area, or in some cases you would have multiple stores? Or is there a foundation that the communities can go through to partner, like the Boys and Girls Club?
Yeah, so since I'm talking to folks that are based in Tampa, we have in all the major cities, I have an external affairs executive, maybe in some cases more than one, and Tampa is that case, where we have a couple people. Ken talked about Edwin Narain. He is one of my vice presidents of external affairs. We also have a regional director of external affairs, and Matt Mucci. One of those two would be the right connection. Okay. And they can connect you. One of the things that they do, and they do a variety of things, but one of them is anybody outside the company is trying to communicate with the company. That organization is the one that is typically that gets it on the front end. Not always. Sometimes people find us through our mobility stores as well. But our external affairs organization would be the right place to go for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for your question, Chair.
All right. Any other questions? Eddie, Dree, Greg, Jennifer?
Hi, it's Greg. Joe, first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. The information that you've shared with us, I think, has been great. I was a little late jumping into the meeting at the very beginning. I had an issue I had to deal with here at the office, but I did want to just introduce myself. And if you do have any scenarios here locally, over the last several years, we've adopted in Temple Terrace a very proactive attitude towards business development and growing our community and our local businesses. And I understand that the services that your company offers is a huge part in that. And I would personally like to extend my own office to your personnel that are maybe on the ground, the boots on the ground here locally. If there's anything that I can ever do to help expedite, I don't know exactly what work you have going on immediately in the Temple Terrace area right now. I have seen, as you know, we're right close to the university, and I have seen the little microcell, the G5 microcells going up all around us. I've gotten to a point where I kind of count them on my way home as I'm driving to and from work. But nonetheless, if any of your local boots on the ground here in our area need anything, I certainly open my doors to your staff on that.
That's great, Greg. First off, it's a pleasure meeting you. And I did take down the note. It's funny, I kind of know the places where we have problems because I'll see them at some point. And Temple Terrace has not been one of those. And I do know that we are continuing to build. And in particular, our FirstNet requires really, if we're going to wear the shield of FirstNet and be the provider for public safety, we've got to do an incredible job of that. And so as we continue to get more public safety agencies, hospitals also qualify for FirstNet services as well. As they continue to join, we got to make sure that network is robust enough and has the capacity, and that doesn't happen without good partnerships at the local level. So I'll make sure that Ed and his team know that if we ever have any issues, that you'd be a good contact to try to help us. And I love the idea of economic development and being pro-economic development. You know, money goes where it's welcomed. It's just a fact. And the cities and communities that understand that and want investment are going to see the benefits of that investment. And so I think that's a great approach.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Greg. Hey, Joe, just let you know, Sherry's on our Temple Terrace City Council, and Greg's the business manager of Temple Terrace, and the city's been great partners with the chamber.
Awesome.
I know it's 12:59. I don't know if you can take one more question.
Sure.
Okay, I think Eddie may have a question, and then we'll wrap up. Eddie, did you have a question?
Hey, yeah, Joe, thanks a lot. This has been a great presentation. The organization I work for my day job, other than the chamber board, Soaring City Innovation Partnership, is about building this area as an innovation district. So everything you touched on earlier is so important to what we're doing as far as connectivity goes. And what we really are trying to put an emphasis on right now is supporting the blue collar tech enabled worker. You mentioned the elevator repairman that's got augmented reality goggles on. And so we're building a big event, our main event, October 27th, as the Metaverse and You. Love to have you or Ed Narain join us for that. But just real quick, I wanted to ask either for AT&T's workforce or what you see for the blue collar tech enabled workforce in general. We are looking for opportunities to build workforce and job skills. What can we do to help fill the holes that you see in that workforce right now?
I think one thing is that you can hear this language in our policymakers, and it's something that's really changed from the last, I really think in the last 3 to 4 years. But, if you go back 10 or 15 years ago, I felt like we were in this phase where everybody had to go to college. And if somebody didn't go to college, it was deemed a policy failure in some regards. But in today's world, in this gig economy we have, in this blue collar tech world that we have, that's no longer true. And there are many people that through certifications and other things that Florida is really, I think, on the cutting edge, because we have first off, a great state college system. We have a great university system as well. And our public schools are doing some extraordinary work in this regard, but making it okay for kids that they don't have to go to college. If they want to go to college, if they can afford college, that is fantastic, and they should. But there's other paths to success, economic success in particular. We started, so you think about our workforce, and you see a lot of the men and women in the trucks, and we deploy them to the communities. Well, over the course of the last 6-7 years, we've been virtualizing our network. And so what that means is we still have hardware. We're still going to have to roll trucks, but we don't have to roll as many of them. So we started training our workforce. We do partner with CWA. We're the largest union shop in America still to this day. And, there's some people that will be critical of that. Thus far, that partnership has been really positive for us. And we started retraining a lot of that network workforce that might have been a tech, and training them on, software, or training them on data analytics or whatever it may be. And what they did was they would go to night school. We partnered with some universities and some tech schools. They would get certain certifications, and if they made a certain grade, they completely got reimbursed. Not only that, but they found themselves in a better paying job, and one that probably gives them a longer runway in their career with us than maybe they might have had otherwise. And so, because now some of the problems require us to send the tech out, other problems require a download to solve the problem because of the virtualized aspect of the network. So that's a really big question you asked. But if I could say one thing, it would be that, going to college is great, but there's a lot of ways to educate yourself. And college doesn't have a monopoly on that. And nor is it required for you to be economically successful to provide for yourself and maybe your family.
Thank you so much. You hit the nail on the head with that one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Joe, again, echo Sherry, you did. With this chamber, economic development, workforce issues, even financial literacy are so important to us in this region. But more importantly, right now, I want to say thank you for your time, for your leadership, your commitment, and generosity. Again, we're going to share this recording with all our members, but we wish you much success. And again, from all of us, we applaud you. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Ken. It's great being with all of you. Appreciate the questions, and look forward to seeing you face to face in the future. All the best to you.
All right. Take care, Joe. Bye-bye now.